All
And we're
right,
live.
we are, and welcome everyone. It's kind of woo woo Wednesday, but now it's Thursday. Welcome, Hans. Welcome everyone. And yes, we are late. It's at oh my gosh. So how off I actually am if it's Thursday already and claiming full moon because that was actually on Tuesday, but it's very close to the full moon out of the 28-day cycle. The point of that being, well, that's why this jar isn't completely full of the white monoatomic silver, but still is producing a decent amount. You can see it's pretty cloudy, especially at the top. I actually uploaded a couple of shorts before we went live, showing myself harvesting the top layer of this monoatomic silver. And all that is it's four silver coins, two 2-ounce and two 1-ounce coins. So 2 coins per electrode, one obviously attached to the positive, the other the negative, and it's just a 5-volt USB plug-in that I have charging it that I just snipped the end off of. Red wire your anode, black wire your cathode, and that it's this pure white, despite the orange paper in the background. Maybe I'll take that out, see if it's looks better. Not sure. Might be able to see the monoatomics a little bit more. I don't know. Is that better or worse?
It's better.
Yeah, actually, I think that is better. You can see the cloud a little bit more. Now, what if I take this light out? Better or worse? Yeah. I'll put that. All right. But yes. So that is the process of making it. The jar on the left there, that is gray and blue, that is I am making the monoatomic aluminum and copper in that reaction. And in this reaction here, it is zinc and copper that is happening, as well as a lot of atomic hydrogen also being produced out of these electrolysis experiments. And that with only 5 volts going in, it's not a lot of electricity. And I'll move the camera up here for a second just to show how much it's actually producing. It's pretty wild.
Oh, this is super fascinating. The fact that you're getting this off of such low power source is really interesting.
Yeah, it's quite thick aluminum monoatomic, this layer, and then this, it's still water, but you should be able to see the bubbling up if it will focus.
Just kick it; it'll work.
No, I might have to
Oh, there it is. Okay, now we can see it.
starting to go.
Oh, I see the bubbling on the left there. Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Now it's
then
again.
Right. Darn crappy internet connection.
So curious, what would be the end result of this? Where does the experiment lead to?
Making our own vehicles that are powered by, well, water.
Okay.
Right? What could be better than that? Just the
Stanley the Geet energy drive, right?
Exactly, right? There's been so many of them, and they claim to debunk them, but no, it's real, and here it is. And it's, you can see like the stream of bubbles coming off the bottom left there,
yeah,
of that jar, and that
frozen right now, but yeah, otherwise it was
right?
bubbling earlier. There we go.
Maybe I can switch the camera to the other computer here and get a better
You can see it. It fades in and out, but yeah,
connection.
you can
Yeah.
definitely see it. Hmm.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Alchemy.
that's real alchemy in the
Real
alchemy lab
alchemy.
and real science as
A
well.
word that comes from ancient Chem, Alchem, the land of the black soil.
Right? And it's like the black soil is fascinating.
This is
Have they done
I
chemical
want to
tests?
think, they always talk about the Nile overflowing and creating this alluvian black soil from all the silt. But then you go into the Amazon and they're making this terra preta, which is their own alchemical soil, and it's just compounded on top of compounded. It's got like biochar and all sorts of things in it, but we haven't quite figured out how to make this, but it replenishes itself. And so it's interesting that we can build these soil groups. You can build these amazing science projects here.
Right? And son of a gun, I just realized I need to move the pictures that I was planning on showing because I have to unplug the hard drive in order to switch the camera to the better laptop that hopefully should have their internet connection. So bear with me momentarily while I move the pictures around. Let's see what I can figure out. So, how's Hans been? What are you working on these days, my friend?
Not too bad. I'm going to another lecture series this summer through the promisedrevealed.net. And so it's with Rob Potter and his group in Mount Shasta. I'll be talking about the Dropa stones while I'm there, but I'm also doing a workshop on ancient Egypt and the land of Kemet. And so been putting that together. A lot of the introduction in the beginning of it is about, basically Kemet and chematology and where this comes from, and then kind of looking at some of how the Greeks changed a lot of the Egyptian or Cometian history into their version of Egypt after they conquered Egypt in around 300 BC. Always the conqueror rewrites history, right? So and then connecting a lot of ancient Kemet and Egypt with South America, Central America, and even the west coast of the United States up to Alaska. So there's a lot of overlap there, which, as we were discussing, what was it, 3 weeks ago when I got back from Mexico, that was kind of what we were doing in Mexico. We were connecting the Knights Templars to Mexico from the 1200 AD era, and as well as a lot of possibly Cometian and Greco-Egyptian travel, especially Greco-Egyptian travel in around 232 BC.
That's awesome, and that's evidence that supports the thesis that I've been saying for a while, that there's essentially been international seafaring trade and cultural exchange throughout all of history.
I wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we're told that the oceans were barriers, but they were freeways, they were highways, like we use road systems today. We obviously were sending people across vast amounts of water. How else do we have all these remote areas of the world occupied? Now we can see it. That's much crisper. So what is causing the bubbling?
That is the negative current, the cathode charge the electrolysis process splitting the water molecules, and that is hydrogen bubbling up off the cathode, and then there's oxygen that bubbles up off of the anode side as well.
Interesting.
Yeah,
this reminds me of like an ionic foot bath. So you put your feet in the water, you add salt to it to a certain balance of salt in the water, and then you throw your electrode in the water and you have another one around your wrist, and this creates the circuit through the water and the salt, and it just starts pulling all this stuff out of your feet, out of your system. It's pretty impressive. I don't know if you've ever done
that's one and the
before.
Same right there.
That's
electrolysis on yourself. And
yeah,
right. I haven't. I need to. Actually, no, I think I have done like in a little, but like it was like a cheap one, but like it's something I definitely want to experiment with more myself. And it's like people are always like, do you get shocked and stuff? It's like
no, I mean it depends. Men put the wrist one on one arm, and women are supposed to put it on the opposite arm. It does create like a little buzziness that you feel, but not really. And it goes for 30 minutes. We're not giving any medical advice here, of course. It goes for 30 minutes, and it jumps from positive to negative and then back to positive. So it does like a 10-minute cycle, a 10-minute cycle, and a 10-minute cycle. And a lot of what it pulls out of you is liver and iron. And then mucus is usually the other one that you see a lot of, which comes as like this white froth on the surface, which looks kind of like what you're doing here.
Well, they're both electrolysis, so makes sense. Now that's a horrible angle. Let's see what
there's critters on the beach. But yeah, no, ionic foot baths are amazing. Highly recommended for sure.
So you can see all of the Ormus as well as the atomic hydrogen coming up in there. I guess that kind of was the best angle. No. No. This doesn't want to work. Not today. Not today. All right. Well, maybe if I move the camera. And also show mung beans. You know, good old grandma's mung bean jar. Now, the point of this. Focus. No, it's too great. I can't get the right angle of the bubbling. But there's several coils here all hooked up, and that they're all producing vast amounts of hydrogen there. Good enough for now.
So yeah, I just also got back from LA, which was kind of awesome. Went down there for Alien event, Alchemy event, AI Expo, and Biomed Expo. And always these things are really awesome to go to network. I get to meet a lot of like-minded people, you know, kind of find my seeds, my family. And everybody goes back to their little neck of the woods, and we all stay in touch, and then the community just keeps growing and growing. And,
That's good, right?
This year, I was supposed to have 3 lectures. My first lecture on the Dropa sadly got overbooked with another lecture. There was a couple of mishaps like this that happened, but all in all, I at least got to do 2 of my lectures, and so I did the Magic of Symbols, and I
Nice.
did my Egypt lecture, the Introduction to Egypt and the Ancient Land of Chem. And so it was super cool getting to do that and getting to hang out. I got to hang out with Walter Bosley. That was pretty amazing. He showed
Nice.
up. He showed up with Maria, and yeah, no, it was really amazing. Looking forward to picking up and chatting with them again because we had some great conversations.
For sure.
Yeah, that's what's been going on with me. Like I said, I've got this thing coming up in July through the Promised Revealed. I'm going to be doing a workshop on ancient chemet, basically, teaching a little bit about chematology. I'm going to find what the date is on this. Where is it? Oh, yeah. So it's July 18th to the 21st at Mount Shasta. So should be pretty fun. Never
Day
been to
after
Shasta.
my birthday.
Really? Oh, wow. Okay. Awesome. Well, better get on a plane and come down. No, just kidding.
Hopefully, that's the dream. If not this year, next year we'll have to make it an annual thing.
Yeah, I've never been to Shasta, so I'm really excited to go to this, and it's going to be pretty fun. There's a lot of people coming. Brad Olson hooked me up with Rob, so thank you, Brad, if you're out there listening. He's like, "Oh, you'd enjoy doing one of these summer events at Shasta," and so he got me in touch with Rob, and now I'm on the panel with them, so it's amazing.
Epic. That's super awesome. Here I've just got a couple pictures illustrating the self-organization of the monoatomics, the Armis here, and how it always forms the swirls, the spirals.
It's like a double spiral there almost.
Yeah, double there, 100%. There's
interesting.
a couple more. Here, this is showing the sulfuric state, the yellow sulfur state of alchemy, and that when you do a certain charge, the double positive, I believe, creates the yellow, the sulfur, and just all the Armis instantly turns yellow. This, you can kind of see the spirals in it. This is just copper Armis and the self-organization of it. Here you have just a straight triple copper solenoid coil that was on the anode side eroding away, but that it always forms this half blue, half red, this electromagnetic oxidization magnetic reaction field. Quite strange.
Why is that?
I'm not sure.
Is it the same charge going through it, or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The exact same charge. That it's only this is one full anode.
Interesting.
Right. So yeah, it's very, very strange how it does that. And as far as I'm aware, I'm like one of the only that have done that. Here we have just a silver 1 ounce coin and a couple of gold chain pieces, and then a couple of insulated copper wires connecting them. No charge going to them whatsoever. And you can see the monoatomic gold here flowing from the gold.
In that spiral again. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. The self-organization of Armis. This one shows quite the exclusion zone of the Armis at the bottom, and then some at the top with the hydrogen there, and that's tungsten Armis.
Huh.
And that one, this that was copper that grew into these green, crazy, weird nanotubes.
That is so really interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Like that's a triple copper coil right here, and a triple copper.
So imagine if you could grow structures like that.
Oh, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is key aspects of the nanotechnology and the metamaterials. Here we have a copper coin, 1 ounce pure copper coin anode eroding down into both the monoatomic white as well as the copper colored nanostructure of it. Couple reactions, bunch of coils are made. And these are Keshi plasma coils, essentially, that I learned and experimented this with. And I've got an interview with Mehran Keshi coming up May 15th.
Oh, wow.
Here as well, you can see the half blue, half
red,
red,
and half blue.
again.
Yeah. So
on the,
that's such bizarre. Why is it doing that?
right? And here you have the bubbles completely covered and stuck to the copper anode at this point, and they're not moving. They're just like held in place. It's very, very strange. And here's another one with the exact same situation, just smaller bubbles. Blue oxidization. Oh, and on this one as well, you can see the half red, half blue on it. That it was that it formed.
Well, the blue looks like what copper does when it oxidizes, right? It kind of has that greenish.
Exactly.
But then the red is like a whole nother process going on as well.
Yeah, it's either more oxygen or hydrogen also bonding into it. Here we have another spiral that formed on the top of this is monoatomic silver I left out overnight on a full moon, and it did that spiral.
Interesting.
Red, blue. And the green when it first comes out and is oxidizing into the air. Very strange. Mangrove circuit connection. Going into that with Mehran Keshi.
What about toxicity? Is there, any?
Oh yeah, no, this stuff is highly toxic.
Imagine.
Anything oxidized, you will get heavy metal poisoning from. Don't recommend touching it. I always wear gloves when handling this stuff. And here again, you can see the double swirls of the self-organization happening there.
And that's from the current, right?
Yeah.
So we have this fluidic electricity as well. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so that's that little gallery. Now, what else did I have to share?
There's something on the wing.
Always. Wrong folder. Here we go. There we go. It's going to cover a bit of the Alberta Badlands trip that I did this past summer and hopefully will be doing again this summer. I'm going to save this comment and have to go back to trying that. Red Cap Goblin, good to see you, brother. Hopefully you were covering. Fourth Wiseman, always pleasure. His Highness Mythocast. Jack over on X. D-Rec. Who else? Nicole S. So. And of course, we got Hans. The Hans. We love Hans.
The one,
right.
the only.
The one and only Hans Dietrich. Or should we maybe cover some pyramid stuff? Because you've been to the pyramids.
Pyramid stuff.
Do you want to talk about your trips and experiences to the pyramids for a little bit?
Definitely. So yeah, I've been to Egypt twice. I went in 2016 and in 2018. And it's interesting because I went to Peru in 2014 with Brian Forrester, the elongated skull expert, and a friend of mine. I've done a lot of design work for his hidden Inca tours. And so he got me to come on this trip in 2014 where I met Stephen Mailer, Yusuf Iwan, and Patricia Iwan Lehman, who run the Kemet School, School of Chematology out of Egypt. And so Patricia and Yusuf both live there. Stephen lives in Colorado. And so they taught me a lot about chematology, which was very interesting, and what Yusuf's father, Abdel Hakim Iwan, had taught Stephen and Yusuf and Patricia. And I look at a lot of that, and some things. I've gone down a different rabbit hole of study with chematology and with some of the findings that I found. But going to Egypt was just amazing. Going to Peru was amazing because I've been growing up in Asia. I've seen stuff all over India. I've seen stuff all over Pakistan, super ancient sites, but nothing like Peru or Egypt or even Mexico now. Going to Chichen Itza and Tulum, that was pretty amazing, as well as Koba and Nakmal, some of the oldest Mayan sites. So seeing now 3 different, massively ancient cultures really has been fascinating to me. And so going to Peru was interesting because I went with my bullshit meter, pardon me, my BS meter in the red, and I had 100 questions. And once you get there and you actually go to some of these sites, man, your BS meter is shattered. You're just like, what am I looking at here? You start having more and more and more questions. And so after I left Peru, I was, obviously invited by Patricia, Yusuf, and Stephen to come to Egypt with them. And so I went there in 2016 and did the tour there. And Egypt was even more mind-boggling because you're looking at stones and sites that are much older than supposedly what's going on in Peru, but we really don't know. And just so many different elements to different time periods within this ancient Cometian, ancient Egyptian culture. And so here we have the bent pyramid of Sneferu. Hey, that's in China anyway. So Sneferu wasn't a king, so to speak. Sneferu is actually a title. It means double harmony. And so we're told that the bent pyramid was a mistake, and they corrected it halfway up it and changed the angle so that it wouldn't steeple over. But in fact, once they started opening it up to tourists, they realized that there are 2 chambers inside of it that resonate at 2 completely different harmonics. And so Sneferu means dual harmony or double harmony. And so he built, or the title of Sneferu is associated with this pyramid, the bent pyramid of Egypt, the red pyramid as well. These are all in Dashur, and then there's the it's like the black brick pyramid. So he built 3 pyramids for himself to be buried in, even though nobody's ever been found buried in any of the pyramids. The red pyramid's really
story ever.
Yeah, seriously. The red pyramid's really interesting because you climb like a third of the way up it, and then you go down this amazing shaft all the way to the bottom section. And there's a corbelled room, similar to the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid. And so, yeah, that's the other Dashur pyramid, but it's falling apart. But that's what's associated with Sneferu. And then this is, so this is the step pyramid of Djoser, which we're told is the oldest pyramid, but in actuality, it's probably the newest pyramid. And sitting in front of it is the hospital. And so this was a hospital that was used for sound healing. This would have been Per Wer, which was the House of the Wise, which is a hospital or university or library. And you can see the pillars there. Those are part of the hospital structure. There's all these alcoves and whatnot. What's interesting about this pyramid is you find around its base shattered pieces of rock and debris. Hang on a second. I actually have a couple of pieces.
Ooh, right? Hans has been there. Hans has the evidence.
So yeah, these, I don't know if you can see these, but so this is a piece of a bowl.
Oh yeah, epic.
We're told that they didn't have the use of the lathe, but this is pretty clear that it has been lathed. It has a corner radius. This bowl would have been probably about a foot wide. But this whole area around the step pyramid has all these pieces, and this has different matrices of crystal and solid rock within it. And so whatever's cutting this had to have the ability to plow through both materials without shattering.
Yeah,
So
and you've shown close-ups on that piece before that clearly have like the cut marks in them as well, right? Like
that's
they
this
do
one. This one has like you can kind of see it here, but
machining tool.
yeah, it's like part of the lathe.
Yeah.
And on the backside the same. And so this would have been more of an urn, basically. But you walk around this temple and you just pick these things up. They're all over the ground. And this was the top of a vase. But yeah, my favorite piece was the first one that I found there in 2016. The other ones I got when I was there in 2018. But I love this piece. It's just like there's so much going on here, and you just got to really question it. But the question is why around the base of this pyramid is all this rubble, all this broken debris?
Is asking to show it closer, and maybe if you can get the lighting to illustrate get the right shadows on it, because it's pretty. A little closer, a little higher up.
I'm like trying to.
Yeah, there we go.
Navigate. Yeah,
there you go. There you can see it right there.
So this one has like this corner radius here, and so it would have been a bowl that's probably about foot wide. Yeah, or a plate. Sorry, not a bowl. This would have been a plate. So yeah. Anyway,
yeah, like a large serving plate for sure.
But you can see the radius, and then it's like translucent because of the crystal material. And then this one, I don't know if you can kind of see it in the shadow.
You can see the lathing on it right there. Yeah,
right there. It's very clear that this was done on a lathe. Of course, we're told they didn't have lathes, and then what are they using to cut this? Because this may be 5 or 6 on the Mohs scale, but you've got to have something a little bit harder than it to cut. And we're told that this is all done with copper saws, copper chisels, and sand and diorite bashing stones. I don't think so.
Right? Like impossible.
Copper is not going to do anything. You can cut, granite with a copper saw. It's going to take you forever to do it, and sand, but you're not going to get the precision that you see on some of these ancient statues, obelisks, the whole 9 yards. It's very difficult to do that with the human hand. You can't have like 1/100th of an inch tolerance across the entire surface. So yeah, that's the red pyramid in the background up there. Yeah.
And that the name was like 2 harmonies, and it literally has
Snaparoo, double harmony. Yeah.
Double harmony. It has 2 different acoustic chambers built in. Like, that's such advanced engineering. It's so wild. And then like look at the other, like, what is this mode, or like maybe some part of structure all around it. Like it's just wild. Another little pyramid there, and then the red, like
at some point a lot of these sites were surrounded by water. It's interesting.
For sure. Like these are all canals and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The bent pyramid is interesting because it weeps water out of the top of it, and so there's some sort of pumping structure still going on. So you'll see water weeping out of the top of it. Yeah.
Really? That I need to see.
I don't have them in front of me. Obviously, I wasn't sure we were going to do something about this, but yeah, I actually have photos of that when I was there. And so then,
doesn't that
2018 was awesome. I don't like a lot of the new and Middle Kingdom sites. I think they're a lot older than we're being told that they are, especially when you get to Luxor. Luxor is a really interesting spot. Basically, the Germans discovered the site in 1820 to 1860, somewhere around there. They did the renovations on it. But in the 1400s or 1300s, the Arabs built a mosque on top of a mound. And then they started realizing that there were structures buried within the mound. And so we're always told that the Nile Valley and the Nile Delta has been occupied for the last 5,000-6,000 years. So if this whole area has been occupied, why aren't these ancient sites still standing and being occupied during these times? Because these sites were built to last. And so what we see with a lot of the Middle and New Kingdom sites are the Germans rebuilt all these sites. And so they're not entirely sure how all of them were, possibly put together. And
right, exactly.
The fact that they're digging them up and then saying, "Oh, this is only a 3,000-year-old site," and you're like, "How is that possible if you're digging it up out of the mud?"
Excavated.
Yeah, exactly, correct.
That's how.
And at some point, this was underwater. I mean, you can see the evidence of the water right in front of you.
Clearly.
Yeah. And so it really beggars the question. I was more interested in the old dynastic and before the Old Kingdom sites, which we don't know how old they are, because you don't find hieroglyphs in any of them, and that would be all the pyramids basically. There's no hieroglyphs in any of the pyramids except the Unas pyramid, and it's kind of fascinating. Our friend Julia had on our channel this guy using a flashlight on the back wall of the Unas pyramid, and it's alabaster, and so it glows orange around it. But if you move over to the side where it's limestone, the light picks up underneath all the different hieroglyphs. And to me, it's super fascinating because that reminds me of the Taj Mahal. When you go into the Taj Mahal, they used to take you down in the catacombs. They have like 2 catacombs. There's the old burial catacombs in the basement, which are these marble with jewel inlays, sarcophagus. But then they have the same idea upstairs in the main landing, which are these 2 jeweled sarcophagus that are jewels inlaid within marble. And so your guide will hold his flashlight up to it, and it will just glow for about a foot around the flashlight and show off some of the jewels underneath the marble. But if you go down to the actual catacombs and you hold the flashlight up to the box, it's like almost the whole side of the box glows and lights up. And so you see a lot of similarities between what you find in India and what you find in Egypt. So it's fascinating.
They're from the past, previous like worldwide mega civilizations, but that there were multiple, right? That I personally buy into the belief of the multiple suns or multiple different eras, right? That there's been several different cataclysms and resets and falls of civilization throughout time, and that there's particular specific like 3 or 4, like the pyramid builders being one, the star fort builders being another,
Right.
the castle builders being one more, the megalithic builders being one before even that, and then there being this huge like initial like terraforming like master builder, like whatever.
Well, so that beggars the question: what are all the world pyramids being constructed? Where they're constructed are often on major ley lines. They're all constructed on these grid lines that basically go around the entire world. And so the question is, were they used for terraforming, in the ancient past? Some sort of, power structure that kind of unifies all of us, maybe creating our Schumann resonance.
Right?
Good question. Yeah.
Yo, we got Pyramid 7 and we got Exotic Propulsion. What up, brother? I sent you the link if you feel like hopping on and talking some ancient science. Or if you're up for demonstrating what you got on, we're open for everything. It's full moon alchemy.
It is. So yeah, going back to Egypt. So I like a lot of the older sites, like the Serapeum, where there isn't any hieroglyphic action there either, except on one box. and it's so obvious that it was chicken scratched into it at a much, 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 much later date. But it beggars the question, what were these older sites used for? You have the Osirian, you have Osiris Shaft, the Valley Temple, and the Sphinx Temple. None of these have hieroglyphic writing, and they're using these 100-ton megalithic stones of limestone and pink granite. And so it really beggars the question, what was going on during this period?
And they claim it is not a pyramid. And it's like, that is a buried pyramid. Are you effing kidding me? But they can't claim that, because then it's like, what actually buried this? How did it possibly get buried to the top? And that will have to prove that it's a cataclysm. So
well, you can see the evidence at Giza. The 3 pyramids at Giza very clearly have water damage about 2/3 of the way up. I mean, it's obvious when you look at it. You're like, oh, what's that line? It's like, this was exposed above water and this was exposed beneath water. And so you have 2 different time exposures plus erosion on the rock. So,
right, absolutely. But like, so if they can't let this possibly be a pyramid, because, well, look, there's a second one there. So really,
right?
2 pyramids that are buried. But it's like, how did it get this freaking buried? It has to be pre-dynastic. It has to be pre-cataclysm, because literally it's covered by a freaking cataclysm right here. But it looks exactly like all the other mountain pyramids that have been excavated and shown to actually be full pyramids, just like China, just like all of South America and North America, even everywhere.
Yep. Is this the same spot? Interesting.
Yeah. And it looks very, very similar to the ones that are in the Grand Canyon. Oh, then we got Mike.
Is that the one near Vladivostok? I think it is.
No, this is in the islands of, oh my gosh, I forget. It will come back to me. But I originally thought that they were close, like in the Russian Siberian area, but no, they're either in like Western Europe or maybe the Azores, or maybe no, it was different. I think like a South American island area, possibly. I'm not entirely sure. This one, Devon Island, Canada. This one in the U.S. I forget which mountain this one is. Oh, Great Basin National Park. Of course, Grand Canyon. Ooh, pyramid found in St. Thomas, Jamaica. Interesting. That looks pretty pyramidal.
Hey, I was just there.
Right?
I love. So you can snap your fingers or clap, and it echoes back what sounds like a bird chirp. No, it's different than what you'd have like around a water tower or whatnot. It has a very specific.
Right? Oh, I know. I'm well aware. There I am. There's Bernie. There's Bernie at Pizza. So there's my full picture. Oh, that's the picture I took. Woo! When I was there, right? Also exploring the area, because it's a massive site, that Chichen. And then apparently the ball court where supposedly the heads went through. Who knows? But
so near the ball court and the observatory is a building that the tourist guides will not take you to. And so our wonderful Grandmaster Timothy Hogan took us around to the side, and it's almost like all of the art on the temple is like something out of Cambodia. You have Buddha sitting there, with in his lotus position. And then
that water is just so beautiful along the
so
Caribbean
crystal
side.
clear and no waves.
Found that guy. This guy was at the Chichen Itza site. Come on, there he
Oh, yeah,
is.
there it is. Yeah,
He
those
was
are all
massive.
over the place. Huge iguanas. Yeah.
Here I am in the middle swimming in a cenote.
I've been
Right?
in that one, I think.
Right? Exactly. And the fish, right? They're just so wild in that ocean.
Where's this?
That was um why is the name all of a sudden
Cozumel? No.
right next the main tourist spots there?
Playa del Carmen.
Yeah, there we go.
Cancun.
Cancun. Jeez, there we go.
Okay.
I was around Cancun there. That one. But yeah, I love that. That was like 20 years ago. My God, I need to get back there. I forget what pyramid that was, original or a scan of before it was excavated. Like, not related at all.
No. How could they be? Yeah.
Devon Island. The Devon Island's very interesting.
Oh, yeah, I was talking, sort of getting scattered here. We were talking about the Red Pyramid. And so you go into the Red Pyramid, and there's 3 chambers that are corbelled, like the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid. And also the Queen's Chambers also has a corbelled niche in the back. But you go into the Red Pyramid, it smells horrible in there because there's a lot of bats that are still in there. So it has this very pungent odor. And you go into the first corbelled.
Sphinxes.
There's a thought that there was another Sphinx there. Yeah.
Have you seen the videos of the second Sphinx? It's there.
It's just buried.
And they don't allow anyone there because they're like, no, you can't see that there's a second Sphinx with built or tunnels and open carvings and rooms and stuff in it. Heck no. And this face guy, right? Who is that? Who is this guy? Where is he? Oops.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah. So 3 rooms with corbelled ceilings. They kind of are adjacent to each other, and then one is up above, and it goes the other direction. So it's like an L shape. And the thought is that there might be 2 other chambers on the other side. And the Supreme High Counselor, Zahir Ross, and his team dynamited out the floor in the 3rd corbelled chamber and took out one of the plugs in the wall and then resealed it with cement. So we don't know. But based on how it looks like it's set up, you'd think it would wrap around back to the other side. But the Great Pyramid obviously is the most amazing thing ever to go into. And you go there just on your own. You pay about $200. You get about 15 or 20 minutes, and they only let you go up into the King's Chamber. But if you're there on a tour, you get 2.5 to 3 hours. And they open up all 3 chambers. So you have the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and then the descending passage to what I call the basement, but it's the area down underneath the Great Pyramid, where there is a well shaft and what they call the dead end shaft. And it's very obvious that water was bubbling up through this area under the descending passage, because you can just see, the inside of this room has just been destroyed by water and circular water moving through it. And then I feel that
is there a video of any of your trips there by chance that we can do?
I do actually,
or if you even better if you can bring it up now. But
yeah, for sure. Let me go into the Great Pyramid here and pull this up. Giza. Dun, dun, dun. Share percent.
There's just so many ridiculously epic lost sites, and that all of them, there's just stories upon stories of layers of tunnels and underground shafts, rooms, buildings, caves, tunnels, and civilization. It's all hidden in plain sight and literally beneath our feet.
Oh, it's interesting. Doesn't want to let me present. Your browser can't access your screen. Try capturing the screen.
What?
Well, maybe I'll put it on the other.
Eyes wide shut. Shut out. Raster. Good day.
Present. Okay. Window. Maybe that's what we'll do. I'll just blow that up. There we go. Oops. I don't want to do that. Okay. I think we can do that.
We got her.
Aha! Bingo. I'd go into full presentation mode, but then I don't know if I'd be able to see what's going on. Let's see if that works.
For impromptu, it's pretty epic, and looking forward to see what you got, good sir. Hans's trip.
So a lot of interesting evidence of ancient machine cuts all over the Giza Plateau. This picture on the left is from the Valley Temple, and it shows that they basically used one block to wrap around corners, which is fascinating because you see this also in Peru a lot. The centerpiece looks like Wolverine came through and took a slash out of a giant rock. What's interesting about this is the saw marks are plowing in at a plow rate that's pretty fast, that it's vitrifying the material that it's plowing into. So it's turning it into like a smooth glassed surface. And you can see that it goes in at an angle. And so we're told
literally vitrifying it.
Yeah, we're told that this was done with copper saws and sand, which I don't think so. Especially when you look at the one on the right, that basically is showing. Why don't I get rid of this? Hey, what do you know? There we go. Okay. It's showing a section of this rock that's been cut into, where the back surface has been removed as well. And so how is this being done with a copper saw? It isn't. And you can see that it's vitrifying the surface there as well. So
like, that's high energy, high heat, high pressure reaction to have something vitrify. That's wild.
You see this also in Peru, especially in Cusco. At the Coricancha, some of the wall pieces have been vitrified, and you wonder what is making this happen. Also around the Giza Plateau are these pits. They call them testing pits. Some of them go down, 300 meters. It's almost 1,000 feet and end in water. But obviously, the sand and trash of all the tourists end up in the bottom of these pits. And many of them have tunnel systems that go off from them. There's about 10 layers deep of tunnel systems underneath Giza that are the size of the inside of semi-truck containers. And they go 50 kilometers into the western desert, which used to be the Ur Nile. And so during the cataclysm, when the meteorite or comet broke up over North America and parts of it splashed down the Mediterranean all the way into Persia, it would have pushed this massive amount of water up and over into the jungles of North Africa, which now are desert. And the Ur Nile was on the western side of the Giza Plateau and was this huge, water reservoir that had burst up and over from the Mediterranean, and then eventually sunk down into a reservoir underneath the ground, which several years ago, Libya was basically tapping into and wanted to give this water for free to the rest of the countries that bordered it. So it was like Sudan, Egypt, and Libya. But yeah, that water aquifer would have been part of originally the Ur Nile. And so it's interesting that we have these 10 layers deep tunnel systems that we're bringing water to and taking water from the sites. And so why would they be needing that? This one is interesting. It literally is in front of the Great Pyramid, as you can see on the image on the right. And it goes down quite a ways. And the question is, does it go down to another chamber? Right now, it's filled a third of the way up with sand and rubbish. But it's interesting that where it is located is literally right in front of the east side of the Great Pyramid, which is where these three smaller pyramidical structures are. It's sitting literally right in front of one of them. So the tunnel systems are always quite fascinating. Also around this area between the Great Pyramid and the Middle Pyramid is the Osiris Shaft. And so it sits underneath the causeway that goes down to the Sphinx. And you go down, which would be, several hundred feet basically down into the ground. You go down the first section that takes you to the landing, that then takes you down to the second section, which is what you see here in the upper left corner. And the second section, there's 6 alcoves, all of which have crude sarcophagus in them, except one, which is very finely polished and very straight cut, and has this weird black goo, this black residue on it. I think it's creosote from all the fires that were burned down here. But then you go down another, 100, 150 feet, and you end up down in what they called the Tomb of Osiris. And so it's this room, as you can see on the left here, that had these 4 columns. And in the middle of the room was a submerged green quartzite granite box from Lebanon. They know pretty much where some of this material came from because Zahi Hawass in the 90s drained out this whole area underneath the Osiris shaft. Yeah. So that they could get into the box and see if anything was in it. Now, what's weird about the box is it doesn't fit down any of the tunnels, especially the one in the upper right, which is coming from the
middle another layer. Enigma of how did they get it in there, just like the black ones.
Yeah.
The supposed bull ones that had no bulls in them.
Correct. That's at the Serapeum. And so there are 2 tunnels that go out of this room. One is to the right and one is to the left of the picture on the right. And if that's the case, then the tunnel on the right heads towards the well shaft in the basement of the Great Pyramid, basically. And so the well shaft goes down 3 or 4 layers. It's cemented at the bottom. It could go down even further. But there's tunnel systems that move off of that. And then I like to go down, first of all, I like to go up into the King's Chamber and tone in the King's Chamber. And so that's pretty much, well, let's get into the Great Pyramid itself. So there's this picture in the Cairo Museum taken by the Air Force pilots on one of the solstices. And everybody looks at it and goes, oh my God, the Great Pyramid in the lower left corner is 8-sided. It has, a slight truncation on each of the sides that makes it this 8-sided device.
Right? Like,
but if you actually look at
more advanced and complex, that it's actually 8-sided. It's nuts. It's mind blowing.
And so the question is that in cut so that it could hold the weight of the outer encasement, or was it set up as we would set up with military installations today? For over-the-horizon radar and radio telemetry. So they look just like these structures. So it's interesting, though, but if you look at this photo, even the small pyramid in the upper right has 8 sides. And so you really got to wonder what was going on with this. And so you go into the Great Pyramid. This is going up the Grand Gallery, which is, again, these corbelled ceilings. And the entirety of the Grand Gallery, people originally thought it was limestone, but it's actually all this pink granite from Aswan, including the ceiling. And so they were moving these 100-ton blocks of pink granite from Aswan all the way up and up into the Great Pyramid, because where this sits is about halfway up there. And then there's the tunnel to the Queen's Chamber. As I was saying, this is what basically the pyramid in North Dakota looks like, but it was used for over-the-horizon radio and radar tracking during World War II. And so interesting. It's kind of set up very similar to our pyramids in Egypt. You go up into the king's chamber. We're told that we're not allowed to tone. Everybody tones. We're told that we're not allowed to meditate. Everybody meditates. We're not allowed to have any religious, practice or anything along these lines. Interestingly, we had a wedding in my first trip that took place in the king's chamber. Everybody was toning. Everybody was meditating. And this poor guy on the lower left, he was about 6'4", and he was ducking down through the tunnel. And as you're going into the king's chamber, there's like an alcove about halfway down the tunnel that bobs up, and this is how you get up into the relieving chambers above the king's chamber. And then it goes down into another chamber or tunnel that goes into the king's chamber. And so this guy's tall, and he's rubbing his head along the top of the tunnel going in there, and he's moving kind of quick, and he bobs up into the alcove in the middle, and he bangs the front of his head on the other side of the tunnel. And so he split his head open, and he's got blood all over the ground in front of him. So we even had a blood sacrifice. But you get into the room, and the room tones at about, I think it's E. But then you get into the box, and the box tones at F. And so you're kind of creating this dual harmonic bubble around you, and you really feel like you're having an out-of-body experience when you're toning in the box.
I believe it, and I believe you are experiencing exactly that, and that they were designed potentially as one other reason for exactly this purpose, and that's exactly why that they forbid you from doing toning and meditating there. Like, why? What in the world? Like, why would they have those rules in the first place? Like, what's so offensive and wrong or harmful from doing either of those things? Well,
you're not supposed to express God, and yeah. Anyway, won't get into religion. So then they open up the Queen's Chamber, and the Queen's Chamber is interesting. It has this alcove, this niche in the back of it that obviously Zahi and his team have dug a tunnel that goes back behind it. We don't know where this tunnel goes, but there's obviously a ventilation system going back there. And we just happened to be there. I think this was from 2016 when they were doing the muon detection. And so they had the muon devices set up in the room. That's what these silver things are on the right. But they're behind this cage that's in the back of the alcove. And so I snuck back there and put my camera up and over the top of the cage. And, with my flash, try to see how far back it goes, another 20 or 30 feet back, and then loops off to the left. And so the question is, what did they find back there? On the floor of the Queen's Chamber, there's been a block removed as well. It's got a cement plug over it because they found a chamber underneath the Queen's Chamber that's about the size of the Queen's Chamber, but not as tall. So there's the question is, what is that? Above the Grand Gallery, through the muon detection, they found another possible chamber up there. So there's a lot of new discoveries, I think, that will be coming out of the pyramids, hopefully within the next few years, or my lifetime for that matter. So then you go down the descending passageway to the subterranean area. And so here's the well shaft in the middle. It's kind of hard to see, but it goes down to a cement plug. And there's 2 layers of tunnels that go pretty much from this viewpoint down or toward me with the camera. And then I like to go, after I tone in the box, I'll go straight to the subterranean area before anybody else. And I will climb to the end of the dead end shaft, which is about 30 meters down to the end of it. And it's solid bedrock, and it's a little over a meter by a meter squared, basically, the whole tunnel. So you're really cramped in there. Not for the faint of heart who are claustrophobic, for sure. And you're ripping your knees to shreds on the bedrock. And so I would go down to the end of this. As you can see, there's a cement plug at the end of it. And in the middle of it is a drill hole that goes through. On the ceiling of this is all this monoatomic salt. And so it's really fascinating that there's this alchemical process happening at the end of this shaft. And I'll go down there, I'll turn off my torch, and I'll just sit there and tone, and then stop toning, and I just meditate. And I usually have about 10 minutes before anybody comes down the descending passageway from the Queen's chamber, all to myself. And you hear this incredible buzzing, and you realize that you're not hearing anything. It's just your own body buzzing. And so you have the out of body experience in the box, and then you basically have the grounding experience when you go down to the end of the dead end shaft. And so, yeah, the Great Pyramid is like seriously one of my favorite experiences in Egypt, outside of the Serapeum and some of the other spots. Water erosion on the Great Sphinx. This would have been, a long period of time of water hitting it at a specific angle during rain. Well, there hasn't been rain on the Giza Plateau for 10,000 years. So basically the Sphinx enclosure, all the limestone that came from that is what built the Bali Temple and the Sphinx Temple in front of the Sphinx. So how old is the Sphinx? Anyway, it's always a good question. At the back of the Sphinx is this little caged off area, and a friend of mine decided that he was going to go down inside of it while the guards weren't looking and snap some photos of the tunnel system underneath the Sphinx. So that's what you see.
Wow, that's epic. And that's exactly the sort of openly exposed tunnel system that's shown in the second Sphinx of the Giza Plateau close by.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm going to have to.
But this is epic evidence. Those are great photos. And that's of the first Sphinx. And
yeah, correct. So you go down a ladder in this little tiny hole. You can barely squeeze down it. And once you're down it, there's a tunnel that goes toward the front of the Sphinx. And then there's one that heads out basically the rump toward the Osiris shaft area. And then one that goes up inside, because that's what the scaffolding is on the right. It was to get up inside.
Right? So it's like there's straight structures and tunnels and like complex tunnel systems within it and below it.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the whole Giza Plateau is all these tunnel systems. And so who built them? When were they built? Why were we never told this? It's a fascinating topic. So here's the red pyramid with the bent pyramid in the background. As you can see on the left, there's a description of once you go down the descending passageway into this pyramid, there's 3 chambers, and they're all a little bit adjacent to each other, and they all have these corbelled ceilings, just like the Grand Gallery and the Queen's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. And then you have to climb all the way up in Chamber 2 to the top to get to the hallway, which is on the left, that takes you back to Chamber 3. And as you can see in Chamber 3, it goes in a different direction than Chamber 1 and 2. And so the thought was that there possibly is a mirror, this dual harmony, a mirror within the red pyramid of another Chamber 2 and Chamber 1 going off in the other direction. And so they blew out one of the pieces in the back wall, which you can see there, the cement plug, and they dynamited the floor.
To blow up so much of these historic pieces, this just blows my mind. That's crimes against humanity.
Seriously. And then it's so obvious that they put a cement plug in there. It's just like you can see it plain as day, and you can see the damage that they did to the dynamited floor. And so you basically stand. There's a railing. You can't go down into any of that, but you're looking at it going, okay, why? So my favorite spot is the Serapeum. They dug out these 2 tunnel systems with 28 alcoves or more out of the bedrock. There's no sign of soot anywhere. If you know anything about mining, you would need, face masks and a lot of water and, pressure, basically, tools or sandblast tools to cut through bedrock like this. Or you're getting miner's lung, which is from the limestone particulate in the air would go into your lungs and kill you, basically. And so how are they digging out, 28 alcoves with north alignments in this tunnel, in these 2 tunnel systems, which is just fascinating, without the use of torches, because there's no soot on the ceilings. And so this is what the Serapeum looks like. There's obviously the front entrance, but where 4 is, I've snuck behind the box in 4, and you go back to the end of the alcove there, and it turns right and it ramps up. So there could have been a secondary entrance into the site. And underneath where it says entrance on the right, they found a whole bunch of other tunnel systems that were very crudely made. And in one of the very crude boxes in there is where they found the Seraph bull, which is why they call this a burial site for bulls. But as you can see, there's these 28 alcoves. All the boxes are lowered down into the alcoves. They all weigh about 100 tons. The bottom of the box would have been cut off to be used as the lid. The polish on them is amazing. I mean, it's like a mirror finish you can look at. They're all like a black dioritic, basically diorite or perfect diorite. And the insides are incredibly, smooth as well, and pretty near perfection. The corners are all, set at 90-degree angles, and it beggars the question how these boxes were, first of all, made, and second of all, brought into the structure and lowered down about 5 feet into the ground,
Yeah, I mean,
into these different alcoves.
There's a spot along the tunnelway where they left one of these boxes. They hadn't
Oh yeah,
finished transporting it, right? So we've seen that they were obviously carried through the tunnels, but looking at the precision of these boxes, inside somebody did what they're not supposed to do. They not only got inside the box, but they toned inside of it. And
oh yeah,
of course, resonators. I mean, they're harder than black granite. Like you just mentioned the material. I've never heard that.
It's perfect diorite, yeah.
Right, but
so here's the box they left in the hall on the right, and so this box, is without its lid. It's where 26 is in the photo here. The lid is 27, and there's another one right by the front entrance, which is where 1 is, and they're left there. Okay, this is a 100-ton box. 100 tons is 200,000 pounds. Just wrap your mind around that number. Okay, that's heavy. If you have people with ropes, no pulleys, just ropes, you would need 1,000 to 2,000 people just to move one of these boxes. So looking at this box stuck in this hallway, where are they standing?
How are they breathing and not suffocating if there's 2,000? Like, it's so impossible.
It just begs the question. And so the one on the left is the one with the crude chicken scratch around the side of it.
Well,
and you can just see the perfection of it. And this is the one you can climb up inside of.
These boxes are amazing because they're made of incredibly hard material that is remarkably difficult to chisel away at or cut. In fact, we have one example of that, as far as I know, only one example where a more recent pharaoh had some inscriptions done to one of these boxes, and then they were done at the time with the tools that they had available. But the inscriptions and the quality thereof are incredibly poor compared to the quality of the cut on the boxes. So we know that they were done many thousands of years potentially later. And
different tools, different constructor. That's actually what you're seeing on screen here right now is the graffiti.
So how the box got moved, though, the great thing about them being an incredibly hard material is that they're also very resonant. So you can get them resonating with a fairly high Q factor, and you can nudge them along where they'll basically vibrate the grains underneath and scoot themselves pretty easily. So it doesn't take very many people to pull them when they're ringing.
If you get them to a certain resonance, correct? Yeah.
Right. But if you didn't take the approach to try and resonate the material itself, what you can do is understand the fact that the entire chamber that they're in, that whole hallway, that gallery, is a resonant chamber. And
exactly, so correct. It's set up like an instrument, a musical instrument.
It is, and in the musical instrument that the gallery itself is, and the fact that each box is itself subject to resonance, and it will reduce the frictional coefficient on its base at resonance, will create this system where both the gallery and the chambers, or these enclosures, are going to be capable of moving down that hallway because of the way the whole system was designed. It's a rather clever way of delivering them to where they need to go. Now,
it's interesting you say that, because each one of the alcoves that they're in, on the side walls and the back walls, they have these, it's like a false door or whatever, you would want to call it. It's like another alcove that sits back about 6 to 8 inches, but it's arced. They're arches on all
Well,
of them.
there's another mystery though, which is, I understand how they can get these things to each one of the alcoves, and I understand how they can use the chamber and its acoustics to do that job. But what I don't know is how they lower them down. So that's
All these sites were next to water, and so could they have flooded the chamber and moved them through, a sound bath basically, and then lowered them through water and drained the water out?
clever. I really like that concept.
Super possibly. But
I
then the other question is, what were they for, and why did they just abandon the project?
So here's the thing.
And
I
so
believe
we think that they were used for seeds, like for hermetically sealing, like seed vaults, basically.
somebody that can do the calculations on the density of this material would be able to figure this out. But from the looks of it, their density is too high for them to ever float, even if flooded.
Sure. No. Correct. Yeah. That's where it just
Either
begs the question.
Right. I mean, you could flood it and make them easier to move. That's for sure. But ultimately, I imagine they would sink underneath the water. So I suppose what they could have done is they could have flooded it just to the point where they're easy enough to push into these basins, and they could have attached ropes around the base and floated them with logs or wood, or filled them with something else. Or there are ways, right? So anything that's less buoyant is going to be capable of being moved that way. So I really like that idea because it's one that would be functional and it would work.
Stephen Myers, I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff, but he has an interesting concept about how they built the Great Pyramid using, a flotation or a water system. Anyway, this comes back to, just kind of wrapping your mind around what 1,000 people looks like, and how there's no way that any of these people could fit inside of the Serapeum. And then, one of these heavy lift trucks from a mining site.
No.
But, yeah, it doesn't work. So here's some more precision cuts. How are they making these super precise cuts, rolls, whatnot? And then I'm the light.
Oh wow!
So yeah, that's kind of the end of my lecture. But I've got a ton of other slides at the beginning of it, obviously. But yeah, that's more of the interesting stuff around the Great Pyramid, and we're told that this is how they did it. I love it.
Right, that's how they did the graffiti.
Yeah, right. And then you have this, the head of Ramses here, Ramses II, supposedly at Luxor. And Christopher Dunn started looking at this going, okay, this has all these radiuses in the face that you're going to do this with a CNC machine. You're not going to do this with the human hand. There's no way you could carve these things with the human hand. It's just the mere precision is, what kind of gives it away.
Well, I don't know if you remember Brian Forster's early videos before he started writing that whole series of books, but apparently he had gone there and with some kind of approval, got a surface sample of some of the stones on the Giza Plateau, and then took them to a metallurgical laboratory to be analyzed for their material content. And under SCM, they had found contents of diamond, which would be conventional for diamond tip blades, a variety of other materials which are conventional for what we use now for stone saws and diamond tip stone saws. But they also found 4 other elements which, according to the metallurgist, if added, would have made the material much, much harder, meaning that it could cut more quickly and through more material before needing to be replaced or sharpened. So apparently,
that makes sense.
The surface is actually little bits of all these various cutting materials that are used even in today's blades and 4 other elements. So that's like people could go date their own samples theoretically if they could get close to the stones, and the Egyptian authorities didn't catch them.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you find on the Giza Plateau. There's a lot of obsidian that you find around the Giza Plateau as well. That's interesting. Yeah, I've been to Egypt twice with Brian. Brian's like a good friend of mine. I've known him for years. So I always appreciate his work around these subjects because he's looking for answers, and obviously the ancients had the ability to do this. We have the evidence sitting right in front of us. We just have no idea how they did it. We think we know, but we really don't. So like this site at the Aswan Quarry, we're told that this is done with bashing balls and a bunch of slaves who are drinking beer. Zahi Hawass, stood shoulder to shoulder and bashed out these areas, and it's funny. It's very obvious that
Well,
something is using,
like scoop outs, right? We see that
yeah,
there's this giant obelisk around that same area, right? And so this obelisk gets cracked, and they stopped working on it according to the reports.
yeah.
The theory is because they found that it cracked under its own weight at some point, but we don't know what was going on at that time or what caused it to crack. But anyway, in any case, this obelisk shows scoop marks. The scoop marks specifically show that the stone was soft enough to be scooped like ice cream.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if you're seeing the screen right now. I'm actually showing this on the screen while you're talking about it, which is
right.
funny.
So yeah, like well, as I'm talking about this and as you're showing it, it's perfect because, and I was not looking at the screen. Sorry. I oftentimes am just doing audio.
Perfect synchronicity.
Exactly. I was like, wow, you're right on the topic here.
So take a look at that. Take a look at that motion. So there are two ways to form those kinds of marks, those scoop marks, and one way is that you can have sort of a rotating head. In modern excavation, underground tunneling, we have these stone cutting heads. They rotate around. They're basically at the end of an arm, and so sort of imagine like a long tube, and at the end it has like three mushroom cap shaped grinding wheels on it, and they rotate around, and then the whole head with these three mushroom cap shaped grinding wheels with these spikes sticking out of them, that whole piece rotates around, so it creates this sort of grinding head. But you can cut out scoops like that are sort of the same shape, and we actually see that in other sites, in other ancient grand sites like this one here. But what this one has that's unique is if we look up close, those other sites that use the grinding stone technique with the three head machine, we see these tiny little serrations that kind of run in the opposite direction of the big scoop marks. They're orthogonal, and also we'll see these little lines, almost like we would see, sedimentation lines in something like what would be like I forget. Anyways, doesn't matter. So we don't see that here. They seem to be smooth lines, almost like they had softened.
Right.
Now we know that you can actually add materials. You can soak stone in certain vinegars or other.
They were using like hydrofluoric acid.
Right, something like that. You can actually turn it off enough to scoop away, and that's one of the techniques I played around with it a little bit. Like I've dissolved certain ores because I wanted to concentrate elements and various other things like that. But muriatic acid is just something that you can buy at the store these days, but there are other alternatives to it. It doesn't have to be that in order to soften the stone. Muriatic acid actually dissolves the bonds. We don't want to use that for doing something like this, even in a low concentration. But other acids can soften it to the point where you can rinse it out afterwards and it'll still be just as hard, but it may take a really long time. Either way, it allows it to be flexible enough and soft enough to be scooped away like that. So all I'm saying is the ancients, they had stone sculpting techniques that we don't have these days and that we wouldn't use because they may take too long or they may require too much labor. But then again, the ancients also had the ability to cast stone as well, which is
correct.
About that. Obviously, I'm sure you dug into pretty deeply, and their ability to pour stone that's just as strong as natural stone is something that we also don't have today.
There's a thought that some of their vases and vessels that they had created out of stone were actually basically what would we call it? Bio cement or whatever.
Geopolymer or bio?
Yeah, geopolymer, but basically geopolymers that then were hardened, because you have this one in the middle here in the Cairo Museum, and this is made out of corundum. Well, corundum is ruby, So the only thing that's harder than ruby is diamond. I mean, they're both
Wow.
9 point to 9.5 on the Mohs scale, where diamond is 10. So how are you cutting a vessel of ruby that's put on a lathe that has these different handle elements that stick out of it? So that would have been relieved off of the actual vessel initially.
Right, and this is
So,
exactly like the shale tray. I forget what they call that thing. It's the
schist. It's the schist disc.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, made of
yes,
the schist.
exactly. The schist disc made of extremely hard and very brittle shale, and so there's no way they could have bent it unless they had either some way to bend shale and they had taken off enough layers, or unless they could cast it. And obviously, if you're looking at like the image on the left here, precision cuts there, absolutely, that's very clearly a cast piece. It's a mold.
Yeah.
You can tell
Yeah.
that it's done in the same molding techniques that we have today. There's no way that they carved that out, or that they chiseled that away, or that they did anything else to surface finish that. It's a cast piece, and it's very obvious from just the appearance of it. And so
that'd be
scallioli. Like, that's obviously something we're all not going to buy. Clearly, anybody can make a mold. They just had to have the chemistry to make these stone mixtures, these geopolymers.
Right. So I believe that if it's granite, it's called, and it's a geopolymer, it's called scaliola or something like that. It's the specific process that's for the chemistry of it, and that we are now figuring this stuff out, that it is nano technology and high chemistry and essentially alchemy, really.
Here's another one of those plates similar to that piece that I was showing earlier. But
Exactly. That's definitely using the same technique.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so good. And if you properly identify that as diorite, and if that's what the other one is too, I mean, whatever this material.
No, this is prolific diorite here.
I mean, well, whatever that material is that they've cast and they've bent the edges, it's got to be something that. See, to me, it looks like they just simply took a circular shape and they bent the edges up very precisely, probably with some kind of a rig that had pieces of wood inserted where they could fold them up and get that exact curvature. But whatever the case was, it looks like something that stiffens up, and just like you're baking a pizza and you've got this thin crust.
Right.
Kind of looks like that to me. So I don't know what it is, what that material is. I do know that I wish we had it today, because I can imagine many applications for it that could fulfill different spots in the industry. And if we just knew how they made it.
There's another image of vitrification. This was a box that's kind of shoved in the corner at the Cairo Museum. And they were taking the back off of it to become the lid so that they could keep the charge of the box the same material, basically. And whatever was plowing through this at a very high velocity slipped. And you can see where it slipped, and it broke off part of the lid. And it was like two saw blades, one cutting from the top and one cutting from the bottom, moving at a very high plow rate, and missed its guideline, which you can see here. And here is the guideline. And so it slipped in and missed the guideline, but it also vitrified the surface when it did this. And so this isn't being done with copper saws and sand. You would have realized your mistake long before you got to this point. This is being done with a machine that's moving at a very, very high, very fast
what you're
plow
basically
rate.
proposing here is that the cut rate is so fast that the surface frictional coefficient is creating a vitrification of the
Correct.
material itself.
Right?
Correct.
Like, that's
when you're
insane.
looking at the thing, just imagine that you're sitting there watching this operation happen. This saw blade would be glowing. It'd be like glowing.
I could only imagine, yeah.
And so this whole thing would look absolutely amazing. There'd be sparks flying out of it. And I can't imagine that it's being done underwater, but I suppose that would be one possibility, that you could run it even faster underwater. And then you would just have this.
Or you were using water as a cutting. I mean, if you can refine water,
hydrogen plasma, right?
Right. If
Yeah,
it was
you
cut
could-
on water, you would just have this little sliver of light right at the very edge, and it would be super bright because there'd be cavitation events happening there, and then they would be able to actually utilize the cavitation for a more efficient cutting.
right?
That
Huh.
may not explain the vitrification, though. Still, there's lots of ways to approach this puzzle.
These are super ancient. These were found in these vases were found in a tomb or a burial that was dated to about 14,500 BC. So, you know, when we're supposedly playing with sticks and stones or making these beautiful composites, it's like, what?
So clear evidence of pre-cataclysm society and technology.
Definitely. Yeah, some of those, some of the other stuff that, yeah. Anyway, that's kind of what I got.
Well,
I need to go through. I need to.
Awesome, Hans.
Yeah, thank you. I need to go through. I have so much video and photos from my 2 trips there, 2016, 2018, that I still haven't even gone through. So,
well, we will make many more episodes of it.
that is the idea.
Indeed. Jeremiah.
I've got a little.
Oh, perfect. We got a live experiment. We got some real science.
Well, I'm not going to run the live experiment, but I will show it off. So, I don't know if you want to full screen this, but here's the device. So, Kidium Physics built this strange device he calls the Kidium Levity device. It's an apparatus that uses an electromagnetic coil, kind of like a speaker voice coil in the center. And then it has apparently one piezo transducer that's at the bottom on the inside. And then there are some holes in the top. And he's got wires near the top and the bottom that act as ionizers that he connects to a high voltage transformer. So I designed something slightly different that I think will work better. And the device, I believe, is producing gravitational waves. So this pops off, and I'll show you if I can. Very up close, you might be able to see, yeah, I can see it on the camera, these tiny little wires. These are 0.005 millimeter thick tungsten filament wires for a cathode of a miniaturized amplifier tube. And so that goes underneath. I left the original 3D print first layer raft on because sound waves can still get through it. So I can drill these holes out if I want to, but at this point I don't feel the need to because sound gets out of it plenty good. At the bottom, there's a series of 7 piezo transducers, and they're all wired in parallel, and they connect to the same 2-gang wire. These are speaker wires. And then the bifilar center coil is just one layer up and one layer down with 2 wires wound side by side. So these are both the same length. And then I've got, if I want to use it, a second coil, so I can assemble this with a Helmholtz array using 2 different coils. And that will unify the magnetic field between the 2. So for now, just to protect this extremely thin and delicate wire, I'm going to place that back on the top. It just slips in place and sits there. Fits tightly enough. And so ultimately what should happen is, to answer the question of what is this thing supposed to do, it should produce a gravitational wave output on the top where anything that's placed above this, aluminum plate or heat sink or piece of stone or, plant material or plastics or cardboard or whatever, anything you stick on top should basically be, when the resonance builds up and is suddenly released, it should be repelled or flung off the top and fly off to the side. And so we're going to find out if that actually works or not in this device. But this is the 3D print that we came up with. We've got the STL files, and we thought about whether or not we want to do something like kits or just simply release these out. Like for our team members, they're just going to get the STL files and start printing these things themselves and try a few iterations to see if they work and to try and understand how the effect is actually produced. But that's what I've got going on for now. And hopefully this gravitational wave generator will produce gravitational waves, and many people will easily be able to replicate this and 3D print these parts.
That's what it's
That's
all
pretty
about.
impressive. Wow.
You can see the coil itself actually slides up and down. So like this whole system is adjustable, and on the surface there are actually these series of rings that allow you to adjust it and make it level or parallel. So it's all pretty
Lots
nice.
of
Simon and I,
experimenting to come.
Simon C and I designed this thing together, and he does pretty darn good work. So I was pretty happy. I mean, it printed nicely.
That's awesome. I have been harassing Simon C that we need to start a 3D printing real science episode and series and get on that. And well, that would be the perfect pilot project for it. What you're doing right there, Jeremiah, that's epic and awesome. And it's exactly what needs to be done. It's real science, and it's open sourcing it, and it's making it easily and readily available and reproducible for just the general public and the scientific community to take hold of it and work with it. And this is awesome stuff, my friend.
Yeah, and just to sort of explain what that thing, how it works, or what it's doing, just to make it more useful, if people were curious about this device, they wanted to look up the Kedium physics levity device. Then the way this thing works is as follows. The top has the ionizer grid. It releases ions. They travel towards the bottom. Now, unlike the original device, there's no ionizer on the bottom. Instead, I'm actually using the brass surface of the 7 piezoelectric discs to collect the ions as a collector plate, and they're sharing a common ground with a high voltage source. So ions flow from the top to bottom on the inside in a straight line, except for they don't exactly flow in a straight line. The reason for that is synchronized with the piezoelectric sound transducers is an electromagnetic coil. So what the transducers do is they make the ions move up and down. They make them move along the vertical plane and just simply vibrate back and forth as they're flowing from the top to bottom. But the electromagnet forces them to move in a circular path, producing cyclotron radiation. Cyclotron radiation is basically the same thing as synchrotron radiation. What it means is that you have an electron moving in a circular path, and off the edges there is an amplified geometric electric field that is an increase in the scalar potential along one axis and a decrease of that same scalar potential along the other axes, along the linear direction. So when you have an exchange between these two fields, you also end up with a gravitational force that's simultaneously generated. And that's where we're getting that gravitational wave from, because you have this electric field superimposed over a magnetic flux, and they're at 90 degrees to each other, so they can't technically stop each other, but they're both along the same vector axes. So they saturate epsilon and mu of the local space-time refractive index. And you could just say this puts a stress on the aether in simpler, older terms.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
The aether, or you can also compress it and squeeze the aether. But there are two ways to think about this. And so this device basically, it stretches it along one axis, and so it displaces. That's the third term. It displaces the aether, so it moves it like a fan would move air, if you will, and that produces the gravitational force. It moves it upwards.
Fascinating stuff. I like it.
Seriously.
It's the parallel, or sorry, yeah, the direction is parallel. Their position is perpendicular 90 degrees, and the two waves going together, and that effect, correct? That's the key aspect.
Exactly. The electric field is along the direction that the force is generated, and the magnetic field is perpendicular, but the magnetic field's electric vector potential is parallel.
God, it literally kills my soul a little bit to say this right now, but here's a sync, and it's David Wilcox actually was talking about it. I was watching Stephen Cambian's debug of it, but there was this one aspect that I had to disagree with Stephen, and that somehow Wilcox had gotten the correct information, and it has to do with some laser that he supposedly has but has never shared. But it's this technology of the 90-degree dual wave interaction having this specific effect. And won't get further into that, but just...
Bro, I swear if I find out Wilcox is playing with the beam splitter and that's what you're talking about and all this hype is for nothing, I'm, metaphorically gonna slap you in the head.
I watched the replay on Truth Seeker's channel, right? It's like similar of experience of, watching Archaics through Tartarian Truth channel. You get the comedic relief and debug through the rest of it, right? Like, it's pretty, but yeah, gotta have an open mind. And in that one, it's like whether or not Wilcox is actually doing anything with that technology or just simply copied it from some other source that's actually doing the research and work and the original discovery or whatnot. I believe he was referring to it as what was used to supposedly be able to change a frog egg into like a salamander or something. It's that I don't necessarily believe, but just the specific.
Is this his phantom DNA technique?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'll at least listen to, but things like that I just don't buy.
Right, exactly.
Like I'll listen to any story.
It show us the evidence, right? Reproduce it. Don't just frickin' talk about it and make the claim repeatedly. Actually do the frickin' science in the experiment. He claims to have the laser, but has never brought it out. Like, okay, like, yeah, right.
Right. Well, this is like the conundrum of a stable element 115 isotope. And that whole entire thing, like, is Bob Lazar completely full of BS? Is there a stable 115 isotope? Could it be possible? Well, technically, yeah. I mean, there are theoretical models that show there are some potential stable isotopes, but we don't know how to make them. And
it could be potentially what they're experimenting in such facilities as CERN or the tokamaks and stuff like that would have large enough electromagnetic fields to contain something along that lines, potentially. No?
Well, I have sort of this theoretical model based on Bob Greenyer's work and Ken Shoulders and a variety of others, which give me a conceptual fantasy that we can have a, how would I say this? Almost like a programmed holographic lattice in which we could assemble precisely the materials molecularly that we wanted in the right atomic ratios with the right isotopes. And we would be able to basically rip the electrons off the valence shells and expose the nuclei so that we could pluck out neutrons or protons to our heart's desire. And we would be able to fabricate these isotopes in whatever ratio we wanted by using some kind of...
You are specifically talking about what my end goal of my electrolysis alchemy experimentation and development is, and what I believe can be done with these monoatomics, the bagel coils, the Keshi coils, and electrolysis in general.
Right. So here's basically the concept. We have some machine that can take atoms apart, but the problem...
So here's the missing part, and the key aspect is the resonant frequency of each metal and element that you're trying to transmute to, and that you have that pumping through both the anode and the cathode going into the electrolysis, which will then structure the water specifically into that crystal lattice that you are speaking of, and then the atomic hydrogen from the electrolysis reaction from the water bonds into the metal, or the if you have an arc plasma, the ball lightning aspect of it, and then creates that transmutation of elements and matter.
Well, yeah, I mean that's one way. That's one way to do it. There are, like I said, there are a multitude of different approaches. You're talking about liquid method, and I understand that almost everything that you're doing right now is a liquid-based approach to transmutation.
But
But I've also
stepping it up a notch, we'll have the a high voltage electrical plasma arc going between the anode cathode, the two electrodes, and then you have that ball lightning plasma fusion EVO aspect, but instead of it being in air, you have it in a much denser but still just hydrogen oxygen makeup material to be doing that transmutation of elements in.
right. I just want to make sure that you're aware of the other methods, which include atmospheric plasma transmutation and vacuum transmutation, which you can do using the same high voltage fields, but it's not anywhere near as bright, but you end up getting a lot of plasma inside the chamber. And then you have other methods as well that you can use the electric fields to polarize some of the elements. So, different
Absolutely.
be aware of them, because I don't want people to think like it's only
100%. Walter Russell being the one with the plasma tube aspect discovery of it, right?
right. Even apparently the Geet system is some kind of a plasma reaction.
Yeah. Shout out Geet. Hans mentioned it at the start of the stream.
Yeah.
Oh, no surprise there. It's hard to go into the free energy stuff without mentioning Geet, because he's one more of those long history of cases where he died and now all this work is left behind, right? And he goes along with Stan Myers and all these other folks that you start to talk about them, and all of a sudden things go wrong with the stream. But probably not going to happen today at this point in the stream. You just don't have enough viewers today. But we've seen you start to talk about HHO and hydrogen technology, and everything goes awry.
And that's exactly what I am producing in front of us. The first one, not so much of it, more just monoatomic silver, where I have two just pure silver coins as the anode and cathode, and you can see the white layer about an inch or two from the top going down of the pure silver monoatomics there. And then now I'm going to go light up the jar on the left, which is it's completely full of monoatomic aluminum ormus at this point, just because the reaction's so high. But hopefully I'll be able to show the amount of hydrogen being produced still off of just the 5 volts of the copper coil here momentarily.
Mm-hmm. Now keep on going with the experiments. You've made some unique materials. The one thing that you haven't really done that I'd like to see you do more of, BurnEye, is mess around with what those materials might be able to do. So you created, ultimately the goal of running these experiments in water is you're going to end up with these solid powder materials or some kind of, condensate. And you've got to figure out, how is this useful in our laboratory experiments? What can we do with this condensate? What can we do with these weird elements that have strange colors and unusual properties? So it's up to you. You have the materials, so either ship them out to people who can use them or start to run the experiments yourself.
Yeah, next job here is starting to make care packages for everyone and start shipping them out. As well as starting to capture the hydrogen and actually use it itself. And possibly finally hooking up a couple of my spare microwaves far away from my house, but running some of these materials in that and seeing the transmutation that supposedly happens in microwaves with this material. And that would be epic potential results if the claims of others are able to be repeated.
Yeah, what I want to do is actually modify a couple of magnetrons. I've got a box with a great number of them in there, and so I want to have a hand choice pick at the best ones. So I want to augment the ceramic magnets that are on the magnetrons and replace them with smaller, higher density magnets, and them have a set of coils on both sides around those magnets to control and vary the field, which will allow me to basically frequency modulate, just like an FM radio station, the output frequency of the magnetron.
Nice. All right. Well, any last words, my friends, as we're getting real close to the 2-hour mark, and I have to keep it under 2 hours for this special AI shorts feature to work, and it's pretty epic. So, want to try it out again, but yeah,
you guys can finish it up.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for showing us what
Yeah,
you're
thanks for
working on.
joining. That's
Jeremiah,
super amazing.
epic stuff. I
Very
look forward
interesting
to
stuff.
Much love. Hans, any last words, my friend?
Not off the top of head, unless you guys want to come to Shasta, July 18th to the 21st.
Oh, there is one more thing I wanted to ask you, Hans, again. Yeah, I'll bring this up. You had mentioned on a live stream once that you'd seen a apparatus at, I think it was a Keshi conference or convention or something.
Oh, it was Nassim Haramein at the Resonance Project.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It was
it
was like an octagonal scaffolding that was made out of, it was like printed plastic, basically,
right,
3D printed. And then it had like 1/5 inch copper wire wrapped, like interwoven around it. So one going in one direction and one going in the other direction.
Yeah.
So it would create
got
like
this
this
3D
web.
printer, right? So it's time for me to really think about this story that you reported on. And
he plugged it into a 9-volt battery, and the thing lifted up off the table, and petered out pretty quickly. But it was like interesting that it did this.
The question is there any you might be able to connect me with whoever?
I have no idea. This is 2013.
Or...
I've seen a similar device. You can find video of it online. That's something that T. Townsend Brown had done as well. Very similar.
Well, I mean, we all have done the lifters thing, and that's pretty simple. But what you're talking about there with the structural framework and this thick wire, that's no lifter. That sounds like it was a heavy device. It had some mass or some girth to it, and it just lifted itself up. So this isn't like some balsa wood and ultra thin aluminum foil kind of thing flying on.
No, it was bulky. I mean, it's probably a little bit over a foot wide.
See,
there were a couple of devices like this, but that was the one that caught my attention because when he plugged it in, I was just like, what am I watching here? How is that even working?
Yeah, I could easily 3D print the sides of that thing or build it out of whatever framework or material that I wanted. I could even just cut little planks or pieces of wood or whatever to do it. But the only thing is I can't find any information about this case, and the only report that I've ever heard is straight.
It was me. Yeah.
So the question is, can you connect me with somebody here so that we can try to move forward with the project and actually like?
I don't know whose device it was, quite honestly. I mean, I was at a huge convention.
Right. So I'm sure you remember at least one person's name that was there. Maybe you can remember the name of the
Nassim Haramein. So we will have to get.
Yeah, it was at the Resonance Project. It was February of 2013.
All right, so maybe
Janover was doing his spiel, and they had a bunch of people that had brought their devices basically to show off to Nassim because he was going through some interesting patents of his own. You can look up one of his patents. It's this weird dome-shaped device, globe-shaped device that had, I think, 16 fingers, and he would charge a positive and a negative through each one. And was spinning water through the center of it, and it was changing like the water. It was warping the floorboards in his house around this thing.
I think I've heard that story.
It's called a hydrodynamic. What's this called?
All right. Well, we will have to continue this conversation after the stream ends, as I got to cut it off here. But stick around, Hans.
Yeah, I'll stick around up to the end, Hans, and we can talk in the after show. But right now, he's got to just kind of finish this thing out.
I just got to cut it so it stays under 2 hours. Thank you all. Much love. Wishing everyone a blessed week, and we'll see you again soon.
Cheers.
You crazy mother. Yeah.
It's just burning. They burned it just like last week, huh?